Awesome. Welcome to the Tailoring Talk Show with me, your host, Roberto Revilla. I'm a bespoke tailor, menswear designer, and owner of Roberto Revilla London suit and shirt makers. It's the podcast where you drop in for the threads, but often leave with something quite unexpected. You join me as I meet self-starters and creators to learn about their journeys, the highs and lows, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Please support the show by subscribing, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it helps so much if you take a few seconds to rate and review my show. My guest today graduated from Carleton University holding a bachelor's degree with honours, concentrated in forensic psychology with a minor in law. Currently pursuing a law degree at City Law School here in London. She is a stylish Canadian in London, here to share her experiences of life in this great city over the last year and a bit. Tailoring Talkers, please join me in welcoming Danielle Rodriguez to the Tailoring Talk Show. Danielle, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining. I know that you're feeling just a little bit tired because you're just recovering from flu and so on, which I think most of us have had now. Like, there's not a person I don't speak to that either has had it, is going through it, or can feel it coming on just as the holidays get a bit closer. So I really
Exactly.
appreciate you summoning up some energy to join me today, and it's just so good to meet you at last. We've been
Yeah.
social media friends for a while.
Oh, it's great to meet you too. I think if anything came out of being in lockdown, I think people started connecting more with those outside their borders, those outside their usual, circles, their domestic circles. So I know for me, because I was moving to London, I created this new Instagram account, Danielle in London, because I just watched Emily in Paris, and so I thought it was really cheeky. And so I created that account and started following all these um, accounts in London to try and just immerse myself and get a feel for what I was getting into, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. And some of it, I mean, we'll get into some of your experiences shortly, but it's really funny. I didn't know that you were actually inspired by that show, because I always just loved what you were doing, because I was just like, oh, hey, she's just like Emily in Paris.
Well, I'm happy that came through.
Yeah, oh, it definitely did. Um, I have a love-hate relationship with that show because I mean my wife absolutely loves it, but I was kind of looking, I watched the first couple of episodes and I was like, oh God, this is so cheesy.
Hmm.
But then you kind of can't help but sort of, fall in love with it. And, she's so,
Yeah.
so, so great in that role.
Hmm.
Um, and she's very stylish as well, which
Yes.
you are too. So let's just go back a little bit. So you're originally
Okay.
from Canada, and you
Yes.
are the latest in a very long line of Canadians that have graced my podcast. So welcome.
Thank you. It's good company to be in. It's a good group.
So far, the stereotype of you guys and girls being just the nicest people on earth has not been broken. And obviously, that's not going to change today. I don't know what it is over there. I don't know if it's something in the air or
Mm,
something in the water, something that you all get
it's actually
upset about.
we're all contractually bound to be just extremely polite, and if we breach that contract, I've heard there's consequences, but no one has done that. So,
Brilliant. Um, so you um graduated over
hmm,
there and then
yes.
decided that you were going to pursue the full law degree and you were going to come to the UK. So we're very, very blessed to have
Hmm.
you. Why the hell
Oh.
did you why the hell did you choose us?
Well, I think there's a lot that went into it. I'd always wanted to live in another country other than Canada. I love Canada. And looking at the legal systems around the world, the UK, we use a lot of your cases in our court system in Canada. And so it just kind of made sense. It was something that fell beautifully into place. And one of my mentors back in Canada also did their law school. They did it in Scotland, and so it was nice having that connection. I feel like word of mouth it's still the best form of marketing, right?
100%.
So getting that recommendation it just sealed the deal for me.
Bro. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, you arrived here, I want to say is it just over a year ago now? Feels like
That's right.
longer.
About 15 months, a year and 3 months.
Yeah, so in the midst of the pandemic, so your
Yes.
first kind of I mean, obviously you had to go through the experience of what travel was like. We're actually getting on a plane in a couple weeks' time. We're going to Madrid to see family for the first time since before the pandemic, so we didn't really have to deal with all
Wow.
of the mask wearing on planes and that sort of thing. But you were right in the thick of all of that, which must have been
Exactly.
such a weird experience.
It was very weird. It's one of those experiences where you just have to keep your head down and go with it. Don't think about it too much, or else you just end up having this existential crisis, which is just not a good look. So you're absolutely right. I did arrive in the middle of in the thick of it, I guess. And it was interesting to see how differently Canada handled the pandemic compared to, I guess I can only speak for London,
Hmm.
but compared to the UK. This is my personal opinion, but there was this general consensus in Canada at the time because it was just so unknown of what this could do to you, depending on your age and your demographics. There was this consensus where people just believed do not get it at all costs. And if you get it, you might not be a good person. And having that mindset was just, I took that with me to London. All of a sudden, I'm brushing shoulders with so many more people, and I'm going in person to classes at law school. And sooner or later, I knew I was probably going to get it. And the worst part wasn't getting it, it was deciding how to tell my parents that I got it because I didn't want them to think I was a bad person or that I'd changed or anything like that, right? I didn't want them to say, oh, London's changed you. But I waited ultimately until I tested negative to tell them that I got it. I actually ended up getting it on New Year's of this year, so didn't
Yeah.
start the year off too well. But I waited until I was in the clear to tell them, and then they were like, "Oh no!" Like they were still so worried about me, but at least the worst was over.
Yeah, it was really funny because I mean, I know in London we basically just didn't care. Because because we're just, we're a busy city, we're just used to getting on with
Yes.
things, right?
Yeah.
But other parts of the country, would look at London like, we were I can't even think of a polite adjective to give, and we try our best to keep this podcast as clean as possible.
Yes.
But then, when you're talking to, I've got clients all over the world, and so
Hmm.
obviously the first conversation you have when you're on a video call with someone or on a phone call with someone is, how's it going? How's everyone handling things out there? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
we're just kind of getting on with it, really. With
Yeah.
no one seems to be bothered. There was, I mean, the one thing that you still had that kind of little merry-go-round where
Mm.
you meet someone in person for the first time since this whole thing kind of happened, and you do that
Yeah.
sort of dance with your hands, like you don't know whether to shake hands, to hug them, to fist bump them, to do the
Yeah,
elbow thing. Some people
exactly.
were doing the ankle to ankle thing. Did you ever
Oh,
get that?
no, I never got that. We're not as into football in Canada, so maybe that's why, we'd have to take our hockey sticks out and tap sticks or something like that.
I had one person who tried to do the
Mhm.
ankle to ankle thing, and I dumped him as a client afterwards because I was just like, I
Mm-hmm.
can't. It's
It's a
just
red
so
flag.
weird.
Yeah,
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 extreme. Yeah, it's a red flag. That's it
yeah.
exactly. Um, so you you land in London in the middle of this
Hmm.
pandemic. So let's try and put the COVID thing to the side.
Yeah.
Um, what as soon as you got out of the airport and you got to the city, what was
Mhm.
that like for you?
Hmm. So
Was
I've
it
been
was it every
to
stereotype about us that you ever imagined?
Not necessarily. So I'd visited London once before, but only for a short period of time for holiday. And so I had this romanticized idea of London, as I'm sure Emily did with Paris in that show. Um, so to that end, I had this idea that, oh, London is just, it's this beautiful, magical wonderland, where nothing bad happens and people are all, dressed up, and it's just going to be fabulous. And then I got here and it was some of those things. And it was also very different from what I imagined. And it was also very different from Canada, which is a whole other bag to unpack. Um, I expected coming to move here, it would be just like Canada. I mean, we speak the same language. We generally have the same way about doing things, or so I thought. And then I came here, I started working here and experiencing the office culture here, the school environment here, and everything was so different.
Yeah. What I love is that, you get off the plane at some point in late September or mid-September 2021, and within a
Mhm.
few days, like you've already got to grips with Argos. I mean, Amazon obviously is an international thing, but
Yes,
IKEA,
yes.
Costco as well. I mean,
Oh,
obviously I
yes.
live here all my life. I've not even dealt with Costco yet. B&M, the student discounts at Boots, working out, where to, kind of find things on Facebook Marketplace.
Hmm. Oh,
I mean, it was just absolutely crazy. I just don't know how you managed. I mean, you must have just thrown yourself into vociferous kind of. Did you have friends
yeah.
here already, or were you just kind of
No.
completely solo?
Just completely solo. Didn't know anyone. Had met a few people in my program online, but yeah, just really went head first, dove into it. Some of the most basic things, like getting a bank account, were just the most difficult challenges. I ended up going with one of the challenger banks because I gave up. I was like, no, I'm doing this online. Um, I actually, in one of my Uber drives, my Uber driver told me that it's so difficult to get a bank account here because there's been so much fraud. And
Yeah,
so they really safeguard against it. But that, on the other side of the coin, makes it so difficult for people coming into the country. Especially, thankfully, I'm somewhat tech savvy, and so I was able to navigate that. But someone who isn't would have a very hard time. And not only that, but there's so many things that require you to have a bank account to begin with, like signing a lease for somewhere to live, which is
yeah,
also very important, right? And I always make this joke to my friends. For some reason, London has trust issues. Someone hurt them somewhere along the line, and London has these trust issues that I've just never experienced in Canada before. Maybe I've been blessed or lucky. But for example, for my flat, I had to put down 6 months of rent to begin with, which in Canada is just very unheard of.
mm,
So I had to do that. And then baked into my contract, I had to put other lump sum installments just to reassure them that, I wasn't going to screw them over. And I was like, what happened here? What's happened in the past, Not only that, but even making reservations at restaurants. More often than not, in London, you have to put a credit card down or a
yeah,
deposit, right? In Canada, that's just very, very rare, unless you're booking something for 50 people or something like that. Maybe we just trust people a little too much. But yeah, I've noticed little things like that where it's very different from home.
yeah. It's really funny when you were saying that. I'm trying to search my soul to try and work out why that is, because I was born in this city and I've lived here my
Yeah.
entire life. And the things you've described are just very normal. It's just, but at the same
Mhm.
time kind of very embarrassing in a way. But it's like the restaurant reservation thing. I totally get it, because
Mm,
even in my
yeah.
business, people will make a booking and then they won't show
Yeah.
up, and then you'll
Yeah.
call them and you'll be like, we had an appointment at 1 o'clock. It's 20 past 1. Are you
Hmm.
stuck somewhere? Or and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I meant to call you or text you, and I just forgot, but I can't make it today.
Oh,
And you're like, what? Really? You've just wasted.
yeah.
And I can only imagine because that's a very normal thing over here, which you wouldn't think, because in a
Mm,
country that invented the queuing system,
right.
and
Yeah.
arguably invented politeness back in the first place
Mm,
in the Victorian days or whatever. We are actually quite a rude society, um, which doesn't actually bring me any joy to say that. It's actually quite worrying. So yeah, so I'm really sorry. I'm going to be apologizing to you a lot for a lot of things,
that's
but but
usually that's usually my thing.
but then that's what happened is that your
Yeah.
Instagram account basically just
Hmm.
has become like this great little kind of how to or cheat guide or
Mm.
hacks, I guess, is probably the more appropriate term these days for people that are coming to this country for the first time or coming to this city rather for the first time. But Danielle, like before we get
Hmm.
into all the language differences,
Yeah.
boy, from the get-go, you came
Okay.
here in style. Like
Oh,
you
thank you.
always look amazing. The way you dress, you're always on point. The way you coordinate your colors and so on, and the fit of everything. You just where did that come from? Were you inspired by anyone growing up?
Hmm.
Where is that something that you've just had this innate ability for, and that you know law is just a side hustle, and really you should be going into a different professional field?
I'll keep that all in mind. It's actually a long story coming. When I was doing my undergraduate degree, I worked at a very high-end hair salon for 3 years, and it was very very high standards for the employees. So to the point where if you would show up with your hair just thrown up in a ponytail, they would send you home. So very, very high stakes. Obviously, didn't want to get sent home in minus 40-degree weather during the winter in Canada. So I got into just a routine. It became part of who I was. I always had my hair done. I was typically going from work to school, school to work. And so it just became part of my day. It wasn't like I went home and changed or anything like that. So that I think that foundation kind of laid the basis for who I am today. That sounds very dramatic. It's
No,
just
not
hair.
at all.
But after that, so I actually started my career right after I graduated, so very young. I believe I was 20 years old. So I started above entry level. I worked very hard to get in where I wanted to. And starting your career at 20 in the business world, you have to present yourself in a way where it says, "Hey, I should be taken seriously. I have something to say usually, and I want to be part of the conversation." And the way that I figured out to do that, and this just worked for me, was through what I wore and how I showed up and how I presented myself, so that people could be confident when they were sending me to meetings in their place or when they were sending me to conferences. And so that worked really well for me. I found I was also working with people who had children my age or around my age. And so I really wanted to do something to distinguish myself from their children
Yeah,
in a way that made sense and was affordable enough. So every paycheck, I would put some money aside and just start saving for this, I guess, wardrobe fund to create this workwear wardrobe where I could pair different pieces together, and I was all over Pinterest, all over YouTube. When you talk about inspiration, it really came from those sources. And there's a small community at the time of women who were going into law, for example, and an idea of what to wear during the week, an idea of something that would go from daytime to after work drinks. And so I just ate that up. And I think that's really where everything came from for me.
I imagine that one day, so you look at shows like Suits, and
Mhm.
there was another show on Disney Plus that we were watching recently that was
Mhm.
about a another female lawyer, and I'm just looking at the outfits and I'm like, wow, they just always look so amazing, but nobody in the real world dresses like that. But I
Mhm.
imagine that at some point in the future, if you were ever running your own law firm, that you would dress like that.
I would think so. Yes. I find that maybe this is right or wrong, but I feel very confident when I feel put together. And I think that helps me stay focused and do a good job. Even working from home, I need to get dressed in order to do my best work. And that's not the same for everyone, but
No,
I think it's definitely the case for me.
it's highly topical at the moment, though. I mean, first of all, when I was younger, I did exactly the same as you. I would put any
Mm,
spare money from my part-time jobs aside, and I would always wear a suit because invariably, and especially in the first work environment I entered,
mm,
I was the youngest. Like, people would refer to
yeah.
me as the baby,
Yeah.
and so although we didn't have to wear a suit at that place,
Mm,
I would just dress up anyway because I just felt like I needed to elevate myself and be taken a
yeah.
bit more seriously. And it was so funny. It was an IT firm, and it was so funny when
Mm.
customers would come into the office. The other older sales guys would go to greet them, and then they would see me in the background, all kind of suited and booted, and they'd be like,
Yes.
"No, I want to speak to him." And they were like, "He's just a kid. He doesn't know what he's doing." It was like, "Okay, I'm not going to take your word for it. I want to speak to him. He looks like he
Mhm.
knows what he's doing." And, that's
Yeah.
kind of set my path going forward. But, one of my clients recently, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. I went
Mhm.
to see him. He's on the global board of a large global property firm.
Mhm.
And he sat down. I've looked after the guy for nearly 20 years. That really dates me and makes me sound super
Wow.
old. Yeah.
No,
And
not at all.
he I said to him, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Do you know what, Bobby? It's never been more complex to be a man."
Mm.
And I've said to him, "I'm guessing, firstly, you mean because of the whole kind of clothing situation, because
Right.
we are in this world right now where some people are wearing suits, some
Yes.
people
Mhm.
are wearing something in between, and some people are going into
Mhm.
work looking like they just rolled out of bed and whatever stuck to
Mm.
them is what they walked out the door in." And he said, yeah, he said it's partly that,
Mm.
and it's partly managing a global company where
Mhm.
you have so many variances in not just the way that people's attitudes towards dress, but in the way that they think, and there are generational differences as well.
Yes.
And on the clothing side of things, one thing that he said that I've been thinking about ever since was that they were having a roundtable discussion about dress,
Mhm.
and one lady said um, she kind of brought equality into the conversation, and what she was
Mm.
explaining is that she felt, and I'm sure it was the same for many of her peers as well, was that until the suit is abolished and men are not able to wear suits to work, that women would not have equality,
Mm.
which I've been thinking about quite a lot because I can kind of see her point of view, because I think what she was talking about was the fact that, when men basically, when there's adversity or there's tough times in business, they suit
Mhm.
up, they put on
Right.
their superhero
Mhm.
costume and they go out. And I
Yes.
think the point she was making was that women don't have the equivalent of that,
Mm.
which my initial
Mhm.
reaction was, well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Women can wear suits, right?
Yes.
There is the
Yes.
female version of that. But in some ways, I was thinking, I've always felt, and that's just from my own observation of the way that women in the workplace dress,
Mhm.
men can't get away with as much as ladies do. Stick with me here.
Sure.
Because, you know, if we're not in a suit, we don't do dress down very well or dress casual very
Mm,
well in this country, at least. Not like I mean, the
right.
Europeans do it so much better, right?
Yeah, they created it.
Exactly. So, if we want a statement dress, the only thing guys can do is, pretty much put a suit on or pay more
Mm,
attention to how they're dressing. And also, I think cheap menswear looks cheap.
mm, mhm,
Whereas with ladies,
mm,
there seems to be more flexibility in what you can do. So I had a
mhm,
friend who was the executive assistant to a partner at an accounting firm, and we used to go for coffee from time to time, and she used to just love talking, but also people watching.
mm.
We would just sit in the window of Starbucks or whatever and just watch, the world in London go by
Oh
as you
yes.
do. And
Yeah.
and the one thing about her, and I broached this subject with her, I said, "You
Mhm,
always look incredible. How do you do it?"
mm,
And she's
mhm,
like, "Oh," she said, "so what I do is like I get gifts of really nice handbags and jewelry and stuff, but most of what you ever see me wearing is from Primark. It's like the
mm.
cheapest."
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
looking at her and I was like, but you literally look like $1 million. I mean, some days
Mm,
I'd see her and she'd look like she just walked out of Chanel Couture or something.
right. Mm,
And so that's why I've been thinking about this quite a
mhm,
lot recently. And while I can see
yeah.
all sides of the argument, I'd be interested to get
Mhm,
your perspective as someone who's, relatively young in quite a
mhm,
still male dominated environment,
yes.
um,
Mhm,
who obviously dress is important for. What are
mhm.
your thoughts around that sort of topic and how dress kind of, affects how women can empower themselves in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So you dropped some really interesting points there. Just starting with the last point you mentioned about how there are just so many more options for women out there. And I think it does boil down to women typically, I'll speak for myself, I like to shop a lot.
Mm,
I like finding new pieces, integrating them into my wardrobe. I find that fun. This is it's like a hobby almost, right? A very expensive hobby. Whereas I believe there's a stat out there that men only buy 1 to 2 new pieces each year on average. And that's there's a huge disparity there, right? And so I think if you were to own a fashion empire, you would probably target a lot of the options at women and almost inundate them with options so that there's too much choice, which is where I think some of it becomes watered down in a sense, right? Because
hmm
with men, you have these really high quality options that are going to last. They're going to have them for year over year. Whereas with women, you have just so much choice that you don't really have that standard. You don't have that standard of quality. You don't have, everyone with their go-to suit per se. It's very interesting. The quote that you mentioned where there won't be equality until we abolish the suit. Because while I do agree that for men it can be easy just to suit up and go to work, for women, or for me personally, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for an entire gender here. For me, I've boiled it down to a bit of an equation or formula, rather. So I've read that when it comes to what you wear or your style, let's say, there's three components that people typically lean towards, some more than the other. So uh,
I'm
there's a
sorry.
cat walking
Danielle's
across the
laughing because
screen.
my Bengal has just decided. You know what it is, Danielle,
Oh,
when we got interrupted by the Amazon guy who just
oh,
dropped
what's that?
she's into cardboard boxes, and
Ah,
and
yeah.
so there are lots of
Hmm.
new cardboard boxes. She's not interested in
Yeah.
anything that's inside them, but
No,
she's
no, just the
interested in
box.
being inside them, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
she's now
definitely.
hassling me because she wants me to open this stuff so that she
Oh,
can
yeah.
then
Yeah.
insert herself. Anyway, so
Yeah,
I'm
she's like, "What
sorry,
are
but
you waiting for?"
yeah, but this is Jessie, and she's
Hi,
an
Jesse.
absolute, yeah, she's a psychopath.
Aw, So cute. So
Sorry,
there are
you were
really
saying.
three. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's three different elements or components that come into dressing, and finding one's personal style. So there's utilitarian. So is it comfortable?
Hmm.
Does it fit right? Does it, based on my body type, does it look good? Because it might look good on, on the mannequin, but on me, it might look very different. So there's the utilitarian aspect. Then there's the expressionism. So how can I express an extension of my personality? What do I want people to associate with me when they see me without even having a conversation? And then the last one is, oh wow, am I going to forget it now? Expression, oh, uniform. There it is, uniform. And as humans, we love creating shortcuts. When we discovered Control C, it was a great day for
Hmm.
humanity. We love shortcuts. It makes our life easier. And having that uniform that you can wear day to day, that you can wear from work to after work drinks, or if you're, meeting up with a friend for coffee and then going to a family function, you can have that uniform that navigates you through your day to day. And I think when we talk about the suit, we're talking about that uniform, right? I think that's where it really falls into under the categories. You're not necessarily, I mean, there's elements of expressionism, what colors are you wearing? What style are you wearing? Also elements of utilitarianism because it
Hmm.
is functional, right? It gets the job done. But that uniform is really what maybe most women are lacking. And I think for women, to her point, it does take more work. It takes a lot more effort to just curate that sense of uniform because we weren't really given anything out of the box.
Yeah. I, guys, speaking from my experience of my clients, still for the most part, although, I mean, our suit sales are still strong. I mean, they've
Mm,
recovered significantly since the pandemic. And it's
mm,
because guys have experimented with the smart casual thing
yes.
for quite some time now, and now it just gives them a super headache. So they've just reverted back to the suit for utility
Mhm.
purpose, that it's quick,
Right.
it's easy, they can just throw it on, and they're not really so bothered about the whole expression thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're more of an employee mindset. So they could still be a partner in a law firm or an accounting
Hmm.
firm or PwC or whatever, but for all intents and purposes, they have an employee mindset. And then when
Mm,
you have clients who have an entrepreneur mindset, so whether they're a
mm,
partner in a firm, but they have a growth way of thinking,
right.
or
Hmm.
they're a self-starter entrepreneur, someone who's built a business, sold it, and so on.
Hmm.
Those people are kind of less about the utility and more about, I need to say something to the world, and
Hmm.
when people meet me, I need them. This is the messaging that I need to get. And I would have thought that for women, especially having had to fight so hard and continuing
Mm,
to
yeah.
fight so
Hmm.
hard against all these glass ceilings that have been put
Yeah.
in to corporate
Hmm.
environments, that being expressive through clothing
Hmm.
would actually be more important than
Hmm.
being utilitarian. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting conversation. Obviously, I know
Hmm.
you're completely on board with that idea. Um,
Yeah, just quickly, it's funny you mentioned that because I was at this event at a big city law firm last week, I believe. And it's always a question of, oh, what do I wear to this? The dress codes. I listened to one of your podcasts about dress codes, and that's been a whole new experience for me here as opposed to in Canada. But looking at the dress code and figuring out what to wear, I have this beautifully colored blazer. It's kind of an eggplant purple, and it's stuck with me for forever. It's very good quality. It's one of the pieces I first bought when I started out, and I brought it to London just because of how important it is, and I decided to wear it when I knew that a lot of people would be either wearing black or gray
mhm.
or maybe navy blue,
Yeah.
which would be, quite rare in these things. And I was absolutely right. I showed up, men and women were all wearing black and gray. I was the only person who was wearing any form of color. And I think that should change. I think that there should be that sense of expressionism within, an appropriate professional way. I'm all for that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Same for me. I keep saying, listeners will roll their eyes because they've heard this 100 times. That I'm a little bit more introverted, especially when I go into big group
Mm,
situations. Like I'm not
mhm,
the sort of person that likes going up to people and introducing myself and someone I don't still have that confidence. I'm getting
mhm,
better and better, but still, I prefer people to come to me and initiate.
mm,
And the way
mhm.
that I do that is through the way that I dress, because it gives
Yeah.
something for people to compliment, comment on, or at
Mm,
least when I walk into a room to snap round and look at me.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
one of my favorite pieces is an aubergine or
Mm.
eggplant, you call
Oh
it.
yeah,
We're
sorry.
gonna
My
get in.
Canadian came out.
We're gonna get into this.
Yes.
Um, an eggplant colored
Mhm.
jacket that
Yes.
that evening really just helped me
Mm.
to click with a lot of people. But it was the color that was sort of drawing them to me, like
Yeah.
moths to a flame, which is
Absolutely.
so
I find
interesting.
it, yeah, in those kind of environments, it's so interesting being able to connect on something that isn't about necessarily work or business, just connecting about something a little more personal, like what you chose to wear. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Daniel, you have this natural, great sense of humor. You're very, very funny. And I don't know if it's intentional or if you realize it, but I'm going to tell you, you are
Oh, thank
naturally
you.
sometimes hilarious, because I
Oh,
know
wow.
I don't get the feeling with a lot of your posts that you
Mhm.
particularly spend hours and hours crafting them, because Lord knows you don't have time with everything that you have on.
No.
But, I mean, there was one where you were talking about essential Waitrose. So I have this love-hate relationship with Waitrose because I
Oh,
just
no.
don't think the quality is that good for,
Mm,
the prices that they charge. But were
mm.
you talking about the essential Waitrose range? You like, okay, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. So this is Danielle, right? And one of her
Okay.
many tips. The essential Waitrose range gives you the quality you need at extremely low prices. A banana is 15p, a carrot is 8p, and a sweet potato is 34p. I wouldn't put those together in a dish, but you get the point. I mean, just little, very, I can imagine you just kind of writing those with a completely straight
Yeah.
face, right? We
Yeah.
all find it on the other side absolutely hilarious, but it also sticks, which is the thing. And I
Mm.
also think if you
Mhm.
ever wanted to, you would, in future have a career in stand up or
Oh.
observational comedy or something. Honestly, you are hilarious.
I
Um,
I I should take that to heart. Tuition is telling me not to,
yeah.
just because of how much I've paid into it. But
Yeah, no, you need to max out your investment, and
oh yes,
you can
yeah.
explore other things afterwards.
Hmm.
Um, but s- but yeah, you very, very quickly started to come up against not a language barrier, but you started to realize very,
Mm.
very quickly that there are some big differences in the way
Yes.
that we both speak exactly the same language. And
Yeah.
so, this was a little bit more recent.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing, honestly, just looking at my notes on this. But you suddenly had came face to face with the word chuffed.
Oh yes. Yes.
Surgery was one that just had a completely different meaning for you over here.
Hmm.
So surgery, Danielle says, I really thought I knew what this one meant. Nope. A surgery is the place where a doctor or dentist works. It's what we call a doctor's office back home. But it doesn't stop there. Brits use the word surgery for any situation where people meet and wait to speak with someone else. So a political surgery is where MPs meet one on one with their constituents. There is a lot going on with this word. What what have been some of the words that have and their meanings that have
Hmm.
really found a place in your heart? And what are some of the ones
Oh.
that, as we sit here today, you still think WTF? These people are
Mm-hmm. Yes.
crazy.
This is an ongoing thing. I'm learning new words in the British English language on a daily basis, especially in the workplace. I think that's where the majority of them come from. So one of them is diary. So diary in the UK is known as your schedule, your
Hmm.
calendar, where you book appointments, right?
Yeah.
In Canada, what you imagine is this like 15-year-old girl like angry at the world writing in her diary about, what happened that day. Loosely based on a true story. I've done this. But it just has such a different meaning. So when I first started working in London and my colleague would say, "Oh, I'll put some time in your diary or I'll book this in your diary." And I was like, "How are you going to access my diary?" It's at home. It's beside my bed. I haven't used it in a while, but
Have you been
yeah,
stalking me? And if you've been reading my diary?
it's concerning. Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
"Did you see what I wrote about you in there? Is that why?" No, it's completely different. And now I've tried to use it. It's that like trying to use a bicycle for the first time, it's awkward and you kind of fall and use it the wrong way. But yeah, I've learned about diary, that's for sure. What else? I think just in general, so not really about the terminology, but there's such a larger pub culture here
Yeah.
than in Canada. I don't think you're even allowed to bring a drink outside in Canada. It's just
Hmm.
very, maybe a faux pas, maybe regulated. No one really knows. We just don't do it. But here in
Whereas here in
London,
London, it's not unusual, whatever time
yeah,
of day,
yeah.
particularly at 9:30 in the morning in
Oh, yes,
Bloomsbury,
yeah,
to see someone kind of walking walking past through Russell Square with,
yeah.
a can of Stella in their hand or something.
Exactly. And that's just a Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
So we don't really see that in Canada. And also further to that, in Canada, it's very normal for people to open their homes and just say, "Hey, do you want to come over tonight? Do you want to, I'll make you dinner." It's just it's part of our culture, I would say. Whereas here in London, you just don't really do that so much. It's more so meet me at the pub or meet me at this restaurant. It's just two very different cultures. So if I invite people over, I don't want to sound like, you know, an unhinged person, like I'm just going to cook dinner. There's nothing crazy here. But
Or
yeah, just
tea.
different. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The tea is great here. The tea is great. But I did learn.
Tea's one that gets us within this country as well. So you won't have
Oh,
seen this
really?
because
Okay, it's
you've
not
not been
just
exposed
me.
to the north yet. But so
No.
for us, so tea is tea,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
all the bubble kind. So in London now,
Mm, hmm.
more and more you say tea and people are like, what, bubble tea? Because that's becoming a thing. I still haven't tried bubble tea
Yeah.
yet. God knows there are plenty
You
on Tottenham Court Road
must.
near my workroom, but I
Yeah.
must.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
we could do that
must.
together at some point.
Let's do it.
You can
Yeah.
introduce me to the wonders of bubble tea. Um, but we talk about tea as a meal
Hmm.
here, which you're
Yeah.
right is something you found out is something that we do around, well, so tea when I was growing up, tea time
Hmm. Right.
was basically at 5 p.m. pre-dinner, a couple of hours before dinner. You would,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like your mom would give you a glass of milk and a biscuit or something to get you through your school homework. That was tea time, 5 p.m.
Okay.
But in
Hmm.
different parts of the country, tea also does mean dinner. You're right. In some parts of the country, it means lunch. It's,
Mm.
yeah,
That's confusing. I
it's
think you
very
need to
confusing.
sort that out, You need to have a big surgery of just people who come to talk about tea and decide as a nation what it's going to be, because for Canadians in here, it's very confusing.
Yeah, I mean, another one that that you found out about that I absolutely
Hmm.
love was, and I'm guessing this is to do with some of the events that you go to or get
Hmm.
invited to as a
Yeah.
student of the law.
Hmm.
But carriages.
Oh.
So you read here, carriages. Sadly, no
Hmm.
horses involved. This term is used to indicate when an event will end. I'm going to start putting carriages at 5 p.m. instead of due EOD in my work emails.
So there's a funny story with this one and how I learned it. There's always a funny, I think it's funny. Maybe other people think it's very sad. But my law school sent out this email. We were having a ball. It was a nice black tie event. And the email said carriages at 10. And so I'm here thinking, oh, that's so cool. They're sending horse-drawn carriages for us. That's so
Yeah.
fancy. My tuition is going towards this. I'm okay with it. No, I'd asked one of my British classmates, and she just laughed at me for a long time. And then
Yeah.
I learned.
No.
Hmm.
Carriages at 5 p.m. means you go outside at 5 p.m. and you stand there
Hmm.
with your cell phone, you try and get
Mm,
reception and you call an
yeah,
Uber.
yeah, exactly. That's the modern day carriages,
I
but I like that they've kept it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any consolation,
Hmm.
when I see carriages at 10 p.m. or whatever on an invite, I still
Hmm.
think the same thing. I still think that
Oh, good.
clippity clop horses are going to come with a,
Yeah,
whatever they call those
yeah,
butler type guys and a carriage
yeah.
and,
Very Bridgerton style. I like
yeah,
it.
exactly. I mean, it's Disney inside my head, so, there we
That's
go.
the way to live. Yeah, that's the way
Have
to
you got
live.
to grips with faffing around, Lush, Giza?
No, no, I don't know. I was trying on a dress, and the sales lady said lush, and so I was trying to figure out what that meant. I still don't know.
So
Geezer,
Lush
I've
is like,
heard
oh, you look
from.
lush,
Mhm.
Danielle. Like,
Yeah.
there was that picture of you with the umbrella and your raincoat. You look
Mm-hmm.
lush.
Yeah.
It's not,
Okay.
by the
Is
way, it's
that
not a term that I would use. But it's
okay?
like you look
Okay.
amazing. You look
Okay.
awesome.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna try
Okay,
to sprinkle that into my vocabulary.
exactly. Let's try
And
and level
then
you up here. So any others
yeah.
that you're kind of struggling with?
Well, geezer I've heard from Love Island, but I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, I don't know how to use it day to day.
So geezer, how do we use geezer? He's a geezer. He's a geezer. He's a lad. He's a so it's someone who's maybe a little bit shifty, but
Oh,
also a little
in
bit
a good
cool at the
way?
same. Well,
Okay. Does he
kind
have a
of,
good heart?
I don't know. It kind
Mm,
of treads that sort of
unknown.
borderline, but then they're also kind
Okay.
of cool as well.
Mm, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think that one it's really
Interesting.
difficult. You almost have to really feel that one in the
It's from the
moment,
heart. Yeah.
yeah, to sort of then use
Okay.
it. Just like I don't think
Hmm.
anyone would describe me as a geezer, but geezers, I think
Okay.
they're a little bit dodgy. Oh,
Mm.
hang on, have I just dropped another word there?
I think I know dodgy.
Yeah,
Like, it's like shady.
suspect,
Like, yeah,
shady. Yeah,
okay.
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So geezers are
Okay.
kind of seen as maybe being a little bit cool, but also a little
Mhm.
bit shady at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. They maybe they just won't put their walls down, you know?
maybe.
They're just, yeah. There's
Yeah,
something deeper there, I think.
yeah. Don't maybe not the sort of person you should be dating. Um,
Hmm.
right. So
Stay away from the geezers.
yeah, stay away from them. Okay, so now so faffing around is one that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned as well. So faffing around
Yeah.
is like doing nonsense, like faffing around. Like
Okay.
you're not really doing anything right now, you're just wasting time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Stuff in there.
Danielle, have you written that paper yet? And you'd be like, no, I've
Mm-mm.
just been faffing around for the last few hours.
Okay. So if it's a verb, could you say to faff? Is
You
that
could say,
is
yeah,
that
to faff
possible?
around. Yeah.
Okay. Faff around. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I love how you used a community reference though. For those of
Oh,
you
you
listening
watch
that hadn't,
Community.
so I hadn't seen Community until earlier this year.
Okay.
I'm on another podcast called Play Pause Turn, where we talk about what we
Mm.
watched, what we listened. It's like a geek pop culture thing.
Nice.
And
Hmm.
one of my fellow hosts, Alex, he was telling me about Community because I love the
Mm.
American version of The Office is one of my favorite
Yes.
shows ever. And
Yeah.
so he was telling me about Community, and so I was like, no, I haven't seen it. And I binge watched the
Hmm.
whole thing through spring this year,
Yeah.
spring and
Hmm.
summer, and I love that show so much.
Yeah.
But I love that you use that reference because in the show there's a character called Britta. If you lot at home haven't seen it,
Mm.
just go watch it. It's on Netflix. And that's what they say whenever something goes wrong. It's like you
Mm.
Britted it. You know, when you did
Yeah,
something wrong, you Britted it. They use her name as an adjective. Poor thing. So
I
I
love
love
it.
that you did that.
Yeah.
Whilst we're together, is there anything
Yeah.
else that's been bothering you, slang wise?
Oh, hmm. Is this a surgery right now? I feel like
Is
I feel
that's
like this is a
really a
surgery
big?
about British slang. I like it. See, I'm trying to use it as much as possible,
Oh
so
yeah, I get
I
what you
don't
did
embarrass
there.
myself. Thank you. No, there isn't really anything I can think of right now.
Okay, well, you can
Um,
always just, if you get
yeah,
stuck at any time or there's someone in front of you that is using words and
yeah,
they're talking English, but you're just like, what? Um, just
yeah.
call me and put me on speaker and I'll guide you through it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will. I will for sure.
Um, so I guess what I also want to ask you is,
Hmm.
before I let you go,
Yes.
most
Mhm.
favorite places in London so far.
Oh, are you talking about food or what do you?
Oh, okay, let's talk
It's a big
food because that's one
question.
of my favorite
Okay.
things too.
Okay. So the one thing I will say, and I don't want to, get the haters for this, but the sushi in London hasn't been great. I'm not gonna lie. I love
I
sushi
agree.
so much. Yeah, I haven't found good sushi. So if anyone has sushi recommendations, please tell me. I will try them all. Um, but other than that, I really do like I love Indian food. So I mean Dishoom, it's very typical, but I love Dishoom. It's a good spot. And I really like Hoppers. They have really good Sri Lankan food. So that's been good. It's been one of the only places I've found a lot of spice in
Yeah.
London, to be honest with you. It's quite rare. Other than
Are
that,
you
I
quite
mean,
into spice?
yeah. I like spice for flavor, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you just Dishim is on my list. I still not been.
Oh, it's so
Um,
good.
Hoppers I'd never heard of, so I'm
Oh,
gonna have to go
you
check
should
that
try
out.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
I
try.
probably would have a couple. I think I do have a couple sushi recommendations for you.
Oh,
So
good.
I'll message those
Okay,
to you. There's one in particular in Maida
please.
Vale. I don't know if you get up that side of London at
Okay.
all. It's just the other side. Do you know St. John's Wood?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. It's
Hmm.
just the other
Yes, I
side.
do. I'm
Um,
getting used to all the tube lines, trying
yeah.
my best.
It's a very easy city to get around once you kind of get to grips with all of that,
Hmm.
which is the great thing. And then
Yeah.
just generally speaking, have there been any
Mm.
kind of spots or neighborhoods that you've
Mm.
really loved so far?
Yeah, I would say so. I went to Crouch End a few months back for an event, and
Hmm.
it is lovely. It honestly reminds me of some of the smaller villages in Canada, so it's a
Yeah,
little nostalgic for me in that sense. But that was just so cute, kind of
yeah,
like a Hallmark movie, gives that vibe. Other than that, I mean. I work in Westminster and I really just love walking around there. It's the quintessential London. It feels good. And I have this saying to myself, which is very strange. But I started using Big Ben or the Elizabeth Tower, the clock. I started using it as a real clock. When I'm walking to and from work and I need to check the time and I'm not wearing a
hmm
watch, I use it as a clock and that makes me feel like a real Londoner. So
yeah. We
it's
we don't we don't do that.
you don't do that? Oh, okay.
No.
So back to the drawing board. Okay.
I think people like who live in London barely look at Big Ben.
True,
We
it's
just
just there.
we take it for granted, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
in my job I'm in Trafalgar Square every day, and
Yeah, yeah,
all these amazing places around Westminster and the city of London and
yeah,
so on, all these landmarks that as a tourist you would
yeah,
totally be going for.
for sure.
I'm kind of just wandering through them like it's just we really, really
Just
do
can't be
take our own
bothered.
city for
Yeah.
granted. Yeah. It's not even so much can't be bothered, it's like they're
Hmm.
there. So
Yeah.
they've always been there and I can
Yeah.
go look at them anytime I want.
That's fair. Yeah.
You know, so yeah, but
Hmm.
yeah, I've never ever used Big Ben to actually tell the time. Like, I'll look at the clock
Mm.
face because it's beautiful, but it'll never
Yeah,
register.
it's pretty.
I'll never look at it and it will never register that, oh, it's 1 o'clock right now.
Oh, okay.
But
That's just a me thing. I
yeah,
do love Greenwich. I do love Greenwich though. That's my happy place. Yeah. Just all the
yeah,
green space and it's stunning.
yeah. Have you been up North London a little bit more to Hampstead and so on?
Yes, yes. Love Hampstead Heath. Stunning. Good for a picnic always.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, if you want to just go hang out with dogs,
Always. Yeah,
yeah,
always want to hang out with
just
dogs. One random thing though, because I just thought of walking and shoes. So just jumping back very quickly to that quote you mentioned
hmm
about the suits and abolishing the suits. I think that women do have a tough time with footwear as
yeah,
well,
for sure.
especially commuting in this city. Men that can wear their shiny black shoes all they want here or there. They're not going to have sore feet as a woman would commuting in heels, right?
Yeah,
Back in Canada, I would commute in heels because I would typically drive to a stop and then get on a short bus to work, right? Here, I can't do that. There's no way. So I've had to try to do a little workaround, wear some commuting shoes, change into heels at the office, and try my best.
yeah. But I've started doing that as well.
Oh, yeah?
There's this there's
Oh,
this phenomenon I think has come out of the pandemic, but I've never
yeah,
at any time in my career had so many guys complaining about
really.
shoes ever before.
Wow.
And even I've had the same problem as well. So
Hmm.
people are really struggling to find formal shoes that are comfortable,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so they're wanting these kind of smarter sneaker type. We
Yeah.
call them trainers, which would confuse the hell out
Right.
of you.
Yeah.
Um, Solutions,
Yeah.
because they just can't find shoes that are comfortable. I mean, even my
Yeah.
I went back to wearing Crockett and Jones,
Hmm.
who are established English shoemaker for a couple hundred
Yeah.
years.
Hmm.
Then not cheap. I mean,
Right. Hmm.
I only came away with two pairs of shoes out of about 1,200 quid. Um,
Wow. Hmm.
and I went back to them and I thought, I'm going to invest serious money now because this is a real problem. And even
Yeah.
those are giving me problems. And I think what's
Oh
happened
no.
is we went through lockdown and everybody stopped
Hmm.
wearing formal clothes and was wearing
Yeah.
leisure wear,
Right.
apart from you and
Hmm.
me. And
Yeah. Everyone else.
yeah, and footwear wise, people just
Yeah.
their formal shoes went in the wardrobe or the closet and
Yeah.
they weren't wearing them. They were wearing trainers or flip flops or
Hmm.
whatever. And everyone's
Yeah.
feet, I think, have just changed shape. So
Yeah.
now suddenly they've gone back into formal shoes,
Hmm.
and guys are really, really struggling. So even
Hmm.
I went to a get together earlier this year, and I was wearing a
Hmm.
pair of these new Crockett and Jones things,
Yeah.
and I felt really good when I left the house. And by the time I got to Piccadilly for this breakfast meet, I was in
Yeah.
agony.
Oh
And one of my
no.
friends, she was wearing heels. She always wears heels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as we left, we were then having a side meeting with some of the other attendees somewhere else.
Hmm.
And I was like, please God, please just be across the road or next door. If you do that, I will
Yeah.
go to church every Sunday. I will, kneel
Yeah.
at your altar forevermore. But I just
Hmm.
cannot take
Hmm.
another damn step in these things. And obviously, it was one end of Piccadilly, walking like to the complete other end of Piccadilly.
Of course.
I
Yeah.
was in, honestly, Danielle,
Oh
it was like
no.
walking on hot coals would have been a better
Yeah.
experience.
Oh wow.
And Ruchira, she just basically, I suddenly noticed she was
Hmm.
like 3 inches shorter.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I look at her and she's wearing these really comfortable looking white sneakers. And I
Oh.
said to her, your heels are in your bag, right? You brought those with you. She's
Hmm.
like, yeah, I'm always
Yeah.
prepared. And I was like, okay,
So jealous.
that's what
Yeah.
I do now.
Yeah. Well, I've seen online they have these heels that turn into flats. They're kind of like
Ooh.
these transformer kind
Mm-hmm.
of shoes, and you just tuck in the heel into the shoe. They're very pricey though. Very
I
pricey.
bet.
Yeah.
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 And
I was talking to a girlfriend. Yeah.
I guess the design work that needs to go
Yeah.
into those to make them look
Yeah.
decent as well.
Yeah. And safe, right? It's kind of a dangerous game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was talking to a girlfriend about that, and she's like, why do we have to be ready for war at all times when we're commuting?
Mm.
Like, we need to just get ready and put our heels away into our shoes. And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. So that gender
Yeah.
divide, I think, has narrowed a little bit
Yeah.
recently. Although men, and this is the last thing before I let you go, sorry.
Mm,
Um,
it's okay.
as a very stylish lady coming to
Mm,
London, which is meant to be one of the best dressed places in the world, and you see that in all the movies and stuff. It's a
right.
complete lie, as you now know. But what has been your perception of dress in this city?
Mm, that's a really good question. I think firstly, compared to Canada, the trends start here, or they're definitely caught on earlier here. And then maybe it's the time zone or something like that. But Canada usually gets them a few years later. So, for example, the white trainers, those were really big, over here in Europe for a while. And then in Canada, we were like, hey, we like that. That's so functional. Let's do that too. So, I think just noticing that a lot of the trends are coming out here first and seeing that. And then I think there's this dichotomy between trend and style, or trend and maybe like timeless style, that you see in London a lot more than you see in Canada. So, and I love that. I love being able to see, these 3D versions of what I'd only see on Instagram or online in Canada. And I also find that here I can fully, I present myself how I want to present myself
Hmm.
without people saying, "Oh, you're overdressed," or "You're this, you're that." But as we know, we'd rather be overdressed than underdressed.
Yeah.
I think we're on the same page with that. Um, yeah. So my general perception is that people here, I don't want to say that they don't dress well. I would say that uh, they're more onto the trends than people in Canada, but there's also this respect for that timeless style here that I haven't really experienced in Canada.
Yeah. I think we're going to leave it as what you've just said, because if I start, then hell is going to rain down on everything and everyone. But you have to take an average, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I've only experienced London too, right? So my experience is very limited in that sense. But I would even say, looking at uni in in Canada, it's very normal to show up in joggers and a hoodie. Here, I find that people are a little bit more, they put more effort into what they're going to wear,
Yeah.
when it comes to school. Yeah, maybe it's just colder in Canada and we just we need to bundle up. But
Exactly. Yeah, you need to be functional. I mean, admittedly, even
yeah,
when we had snow recently, which you probably laughed
yes,
at and said, "Call this snow." We also, you must find it really interesting that you guys will get like 6 foot of snow dumped down in
yeah,
places in Canada, but you guys just get on with life, like nothing
yes,
stops.
yeah,
Whereas over here, you must find it funny that we get the slightest little bit of sleet and
yeah,
everything just grinds to a halt. Like trains won't run, and
yeah.
shops close, and people don't come into work.
Exactly. I was kind of nervous that it was going to stick around because I didn't bring my heavy duty, down jacket from Canada. So I've just been dealing with like my wool coat. And yeah, I was kind of nervous about that. But it seems like we're back into, business as usual with the moderate winter. So
Yeah,
happy about
exactly. I
that.
mean, as we're talking here, it's 10 degrees, so it's summertime
Yeah. Yeah,
again.
basically. Yeah.
Danielle, thank you so much.
Mhm.
You've been an absolute delight. For everybody who wants to follow your continued adventures, they should head to.
So on Instagram, it's Danielle in London. If you want to reach out about career, about law, I'm on LinkedIn, and I always appreciate a message.
Awesome. Thank you. Have you had fun today?
So much fun. Yes, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, and we'll do bubble tea soon.
Yes, I don't mean to be dramatic, but it will change your life. So please, prepare accordingly.
Okay, I will. I promise. Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining Danielle and I on this episode. Don't forget, Tailoring Talk is on Instagram at Tailoring Talk Podcast. And you know I love feedback, so do email me at tailoringtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review, and you can click the share button in your player to send this episode on to people you know who might get some help or be inspired by Danielle today. If you're enjoying Tailoring Talk and want to support the show, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Roberto Revilla. Have a great week. Be good to each other, and I'll see you on the next one.